I'm so happy that we have a spiritual director and a senior minister who loves to dance. This morning, we have a very special guest. Our guest speaker today delights in sharing stories of spiritual transformations. As an ordained Unity minister, which is our sibling ministry, he talks about prayer, spiritual principles, scripture studies, and religious history. He has served as a minister at Unity of Kona and as a guest speaker in many churches and centers. For more than a decade, he worked as an archivist at the Unity World Headquarters, Unity Village in Missouri, preserving a unique collection of materials documenting the international Unity movement, and now he works as an archivist at the Lyman Museum and Mission House. He preserves historic documents and photographs of this beautiful Hawaii island. And he really enjoys life here on the Big Island with his husband Keith and a sociable Scottish Terrier, Max. I have to introduce Coco to Max. In their home on the Hamakua coast. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Eric Page.
Aloha. Oh, I can't walk away. Nice try. If a company made millions of dollars and destroyed or challenged your way of life, how would you respond? Anger comes to mind. Felicia Itzaro, a grandmother and member of the Ija people in the delta of the River Niger, once joined more than 3,000 other Nigerian women who decided to peacefully protest to stop production at an oil station. Why protest? The women demanded jobs and infrastructure for their communities. Oil brought Nigeria great wealth, but also huge problems. And at the time, the country was one of the biggest oil producers in the world and Africa's largest. Nigerians have endured more than 5,000 major oil spills in the last 50 years. Ongoing air and water pollution, asthma, cancer, and miscarriages. With the peaceful protest blocking their way, oil workers stopped production for a time. Then government soldiers forcibly removed the women. Today, those women continue to create new businesses because fishing is less viable for their husbands and sons. They use microcredit programs to build their own community infrastructure and provide job training. The lives of the women in Nigeria may look very different than most of our lives. Most of us don't confront violence or environmental destruction. You may have a disagreement with a loved one, a coworker, or a friend. Today, I want to explore the third way, a term used by biblical scholar Walter Wink to apply to the methods of Jesus of Nazareth. Today, we'll review 3 options to challenge and anger: forceful opposition, fear or apathy, or revolutionary challenge, or revolutionary nonviolence. We might call them fight, flight, or a creative response. We'll explore what it means to respond from this third wave of using our inner power, to respond resolutely and even lovingly in the face of harmful experiences. And Karen's already given us all kinds of ideas. Today I invite you to affirm with me, my center is peaceful and calm. Together? My center is peaceful and calm. I choose creative responses to challenge. I choose creative responses to challenge. I'm a historian, so today you're going to get a little history. When Caesar Augustus encouraged division and violence, how did the people of Galilee respond? Augustus promoted peace through victory. Sound familiar? In other words, kill your enemies, you've got peace. The Romans chose men like Herod the Great and his son Herod Antipas to rule Palestine. Herod Antipas hoarded wealth and built 2 lavish cities by taxing the people of Galilee. Sepphoris stood just across the valley from the poor town of Nazareth. Tiberias sat just up the hill from the Sea of Galilee. The locals responded in typical ways, fighting or fear. In Galilee alone, there were 4 violent rebellions in the 1st century CE. Most families just stayed quiet. What about a third way? When contemporary elected officials make decisions that encourage or prepare for aggression, how do we respond? How are we to respond? For us to understand how we can change the world for the better, I believe it's essential for us to stand in that place of uncomfortableness, to be aware of our role in the violence or the inaction. So just some statistics. The U.S. still sends Peace Corps volunteers to other nations, yet our tax dollars largely support weapons of war. In 2021, U.S. military spending amounted to $801 billion, a slight drop from 2020. The U.S. spends more on our military than the next 9 countries combined. The U.S. is in the top 6 in the number of executions with the nations of China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Egypt. The number of mass shootings in the United States fluctuates. There have been 198 this year. 198. It is now a common reoccurrence despite the fact that most Americans support laws requiring background checks and banning military-style assault weapons. You might have just gotten in touch with your anger. How do we as spiritual beings approach these destructive choices? We can react with anger. We can withdraw in resignation. What if we choose creative ways? The fact is that we all experience periodic anger. We choose, sometimes unconsciously, fight or flight. And our emotions, however, are very rich resources. Even anger can help us learn more about ourselves. What information do your emotions give you? We know that feelings are also attached to needs and values. Unfulfilled needs may lead us to feel discouraged, annoyed, or angry. And still, we know that in the middle of those emotions is a center of calm. Don't we know that? There's a center of calm, just like the eye of calm in a storm. And we may express those feelings that we have outwardly, or stew in inner rage, or by choosing to examine our feelings and respond from our inner power. That power is where we choose focused and productive directions. That is the third way. You know, over the years, my commutes, particularly here on the island, have become a time for me to vent to God and express anger that I held inside. Sometimes it's triggered by that unknown driver in front of me. I think you know them. The one that moves to the left and then the right, or straddles a line. The truth is that someone in my life, whether it's the driver in front of me or somewhere else, someone in my life is likely going too slow or too fast for my comfort. It's a clue for me to turn within and to use my imagination positively. So let's think back to Galilee. How did Jesus of Nazareth respond when the Romans encouraged division and violence? He didn't fight. He didn't run. Instead, Jesus, much to the disappointment of his family, became an itinerant teacher, gathering friends along the way. He spoke directly about the realities of injustice and offered nonviolent resistance. He suggested radical fairness and used creative defiance. Matthew 38:41 quotes Jesus. As you know, we are told, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't react violently against the one who is evil. When someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other as well. When someone wants to sue you for your shirt, let that person have your coat as well. Further, when anyone conscripts you to go 1 mile, go an extra mile. Give to the one who begs from you. In literature, this is called a parody, a form of it or exaggeration for comic effect. They're cleverly worded sayings. They aren't exactly metaphorical, and they're not literal. They're meant to be memorable, even funny. Walter Wink was an American biblical scholar, theologian, and activist who was an important figure in progressive Christianity. And Wink pointed out that Jesus' statements challenged both passivity and violence with this third way. So imagine being slapped and turning the other cheek, and then turning the other cheek again to be slapped and turning the other cheek. Wink reminds us that this is an exaggeration about insult. It also points out unequal relations when masters backhanded slaves, husbands, wives, parents, children, men, women, Romans, Jews. A normal response would be submission, and fighting could be suicidal. Turning the other cheek suggests a surprising third way. Think of giving up your clothes. This is Puna, maybe that's not that difficult. People in ancient Palestine wore a shirt and an outer garment, or giving both, where giving both would leave a person completely nude. Nudity brought shame on the person viewing or causing the nakedness. So stripping symbolized a radical third way. Who knew? Imagine being told to run a mile and going a second. The Romans often conscripted locals to carry a burden or to work without pay. Offering to go a second mile would give someone who was oppressed the initiative. Wink says, Imagine a situation of a Roman infantryman pleading with a Jew to give back his pack. Going the second mile was like choosing a third way. In his book, Privilege, Power, and Difference, sociology professor Alan Johnson encourages us all to take risks and to do something. He said, "It may seem that such actions don't amount to much until you stop for a moment and feel your resistance to doing them. Worrying, for example, about how easily you could make people feel uncomfortable, including yourself. If you take that resistance to action as a measure of power, then your potential to make a difference is plain to see." So I want to share with you some examples of actions that matter. When the Westboro Baptist Church continued to protest with hate-filled messages at funerals and progressive events, what did one group do? So those of us who are from the Midwest are all too familiar with this church in Topeka, Kansas. I first encountered them on an intersection in Topeka years ago. 10 years ago, a nonprofit group called Planting Peace bought a house across the street from this church and painted it the colors of the rainbow. It just makes me smile. The Equality House is a symbol of compassion and positive change, and today it is still an active resource center for programs on human rights and bullying prevention. When a city's school system was broken, and many teenagers in Kansas City struggled to find opportunities to share their talent, what did two men do? My friends Elvin and Ken started a group in 2008, now called Fountain City Performing Arts. And I sat on the board of directors. They created a safe space for LGBT youth, straight teen allies, ages 13 to 18. They foster an environment to empower youth through original art. And these young artists share their talent with the community by sharing their life journeys with their own personal authenticity. On my commute, choosing to use my spiritual tools shifts everything. I look at waterfalls, ocean waves, and rainbows, and imagine that I have all the time in the world to get to Hilo. Creative energy, of course, is abundant on this island where we live. I breathe, I let go, and I move into an open-eyed prayer. I remind myself that my fellow commuters and I are on a shared spiritual path. Envision with me this morning peace for the people of Ukraine, comfort for the city of Buffalo, New York, support for the families of those lost to suicide, and strength for families of transgender children challenged by new obstacles. Will you affirm with me again, my center is peaceful and calm. My center is peaceful and calm. I choose creative responses to challenge. Choose creative responses to challenge. So how do we transform the world? We choose the third way. But I'm only one person. What could I possibly do? You and I can respond with prayer, with learning, by encouraging. We can remember that we are all spiritual beings, despite the appearances. We can respond with firm but loving action. Reading about a particular issue is taking action. Praying and actively meditating about a specific topic is creative. You might experience this when you take action. What are some of the things that happen when we take that action? We assert our own humanity and dignity as people. We meet force with wonder, honesty, or humor. We expose the injustices of a system. We allow the oppressor to see us in a new light. You might decide to support a nonprofit group. As individuals or in groups, you might choose to assist a food drive, to raise money for schools locally or abroad, to serve a committee of your neighborhood or local government. Touching lives with the presence of the divine can happen anywhere we connect deeply with another, in a hospital, on a plane, or in community. We can all be Spirit's action. We can be the creative voice for compassion for our neighbors experiencing poverty and prejudice. We can be Spirit's action for justice. This morning, I invite you to choose the third way. Abundant blessings, everyone.